last thing is about kind of Oracle's year end is coming up on May 31st. That's a big time, right? That people have most of their contracts or it's their biggest quarter. You don't always have to do a deal at year end to get a good deal. But if you are looking at that and you have some renewals, it goes back to the timing piece you said.
Welcome to Insights for IT Negotiations, a podcast by UpperEdge, a leading IT sourcing, negotiation, and project execution advisory firm. I'm John Belden, UpperEdge's Chief Research and Strategy Officer.
And I'm Kylie Chisholm, UpperEdge's Marketing Manager. Join us every other week as we share insights to help you maximize the value of your key IT relationships. In each episode, we'll delve into the topics that matter most to IT decision makers and sourcing professionals. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Insights for IT Negotiations podcast. I am one of your hosts, Kylie Chisholm. I am joined by my co-host, John Belden. John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing terrific, as always.
That's great. You're repping Ohio State. We love to see it. We're also joined by two of UpperEdge's expert Oracle advisors, Jeff Lazarto and Shane Griffin. They're joining us today to talk all things Oracle negotiations. There's some Fusion ERP thrown in there, pricing, negotiation strategies, all of that tied into one episode. So John, I will pass it over to you so you can introduce our guests and get the conversation going.
All right. Thanks, Kylie. And welcome, Jeff and Shane. I guess we should probably mention, Kylie, that we just celebrated our 15-year anniversary as a company with UpperEdge, and I think Jeff would be one of the founding people, one of the originals, let's call it. He's part of the OG with UpperEdge. So Jeff, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and then lead into Shane as well.
Thanks, John. You make me feel old. But I have been with UpperEdge just shortly after we started. It did start in 2010 when we started, a little bit later in the year. I lead our Oracle Workday mid-market practices, but I've been a generalist pretty much the whole time until we split the practice up a number of years ago. So I also do implementation deals, etc. Worked at AMR Research prior to that with Dave and other members of our leadership team. So for 20 years, been in this type of role and have been an attorney for almost 30 years prior to this, doing the e-commerce.com roller coaster ride, doing software and services deals. And then I'll flip it over to you, Shane.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I'd like to also consider myself somewhat of an OG. This is my this is my second stint at UpperEdge, but altogether close to 5 years. I was here 2012 to 2015, and then I'm back again. And both stints working under Jeff now as a practice manager, but it kind of feels like I never left.
So, well, very, very good. I appreciate you guys joining us here today. So why don't we start off with just Oracle in general? Right. I mean, Oracle's out there right now. I mean, they're making big splashes in AI recently with the announcement that was made a few weeks ago. But can you just kind of talk in general? How's Oracle doing financially?
I mean, John, Oracle's been doing extremely well. I mean, their stock price has gone up. I won't say it's quite double, but it's gotten close to that over the last 2 years or so. Right. So it's gone up substantially. It depends when you looked at it. I think they're trading at like a 170, 174 plus there, and a couple of year or two ago down in the 90s or $100. So that's a lot of growth for a company as established and as strong as they have been, as large as they've been, to be able to double like that. So a big part of that we're seeing more is, I think, a couple of areas. One is on the tech stack, right? You look at OCI, right? That's their big piece, the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. They were late to market on that by many of the analysts, right? You had Azure, AWS, GCP. But they did get there, and they work very well with government, services industries, a lot of generative AI workloads. You remember in COVID, when Zoom was so big, Zoom went on the back end using OCI to support its business. So they've had a lot of growth in that regard that has really helped their stock price. And then the other part that we see a lot is the software as a service, and that's the Fusion ERP side of things. So that's more their traditional ERP business applications and their cloud version, software as a service version of that.
Yeah, and I think, Jeff, that's where we spend most of our time when negotiating Oracle agreements, is in that Fusion space. Can you talk just in general about the Fusion portfolio of products and kind of where does that fit within the Oracle span? How much of Oracle is Fusion?
Sure. So they have about we'll say $3.5 billion of just the last quarter, last year, the Q2 that ended in November, is just on Fusion ERP, and that's up 10% year over year. So when you think about it, if you remember when Oracle acquired all those all those ERP companies like JD Edwards and PeopleSoft in the early 2000s, they announced Fusion to fuse the best of all of them, which ended up being a disaster. And then when they decided to rewrite the code for cloud, that's when they changed to Fusion ERP. And so when you think about it, you still have all the on-prem Oracle applications. Those are there, but anything SaaS related, that's all within Fusion ERP. So include the full HCM, finance, customer experience, and all the industry specific solutions. They're all available now in the cloud. So that's really where Oracle is growing and pushing towards the future on the application side.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I'm old enough to remember when they bought PeopleSoft and JD Edwards, and we used to refer to them as JD OralSoft as their company. That was the code name, I guess, for Fusion, and that really, I think, to a certain extent, stunted their growth for a while in that ERP space with all the work that they had to do to try to integrate and bring that together as a single platform.
It did, and then they also had to announce Applications Unlimited. Right. So that's where you're seeing there where they, clients stop purchasing, right? Customers said, I'm not going to purchase. We don't know where the direction's going. And I don't want to make a big JD Edwards purchase and then find I got to migrate to Fusion. And so they had to come out for basically 5 of their key ERP applications and say, we will not force you to migrate. And that's gone on now. I think it's been extended out to at least 2032 now. So you don't have that forced migration where like SAP, everyone's getting forced to move to S/4HANA. So that's been a big piece, but it did stunt it, you're right, for a while, John, and then the applications only allowed it to continue.
Yeah, Jeff, do you know if Oracle's picking up any customers from SAP ECC? I mean, I'm sure Larry announces it every time it happens.
We do. He's always making announcements. It's tough to tell. We don't know if it's like the full, always the full organization globally, right, on an enterprise level, or is it just more business units? But he has talked about, and they have made inroads in some of those areas, some of those key areas, absolutely. They have not seen as much, oddly enough, of their install base making the migration. It's still a small percentage because people are happy with what JD Edwards, PeopleSoft, and they're waiting for that business case. What I'd say, though, is what I'm seeing more of, John, is like, especially when they go against Workday, Oracle, when Fusion ERP first came out, it wasn't everything was cracked up to be. Every clients were on, they say it's still got a lot of problems, doesn't have all the functionality, but they've caught up over the years. And when we see clients look, for example, at going Workday and Oracle Fusion ERP head to head, Workday always used to score so much better. Oracle's right there right now, and sometimes scoring better than, or at least on par. So they have caught up over time.
No, that's good to know. So let's narrow down now on Oracle kind of into where, our wheelhouse, right? Which is negotiation, pricing, et cetera. Jeff, my experience and that of others, I think, is Oracle has always been notorious for contract negotiations, right? And the difficulty in doing those contract negotiations. Can you talk just a little bit about what are the attributes within contracts that really cause people the most pain, from an Oracle perspective?
Yeah, there's a few things, and Shane, I'll let you jump in here if you want on some of the stuff too. But the negotiations, Oracle could just be very difficult from a relationship perspective. They do a better job now, but they still talk more about the overall holistic approach and the value they can provide. But when it comes to contracting, it can be very transactional, and that becomes very frustrating for clients. The other parts that are frustrating for clients, I think, just historically, the audits, especially on the tech stack. Also, Oracle's approach with respect to Java, and that's kind of a separate sales team. So clients look at this, they say, we're kind of getting approached from multiple different angles within Oracle. We don't seem to have one person that can oversee all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of rapid fire and a lot of different tactics they use going forward there as far as giving information piecemeal, things being done transactionally, having to go through different approval processes and chains, managing multiple negotiations sometimes at the same time. It can lead to a lot of frustration. And Shane, let me flip it to you to share some of the thoughts you've seen.
Yeah, I would say they know the game really well. So if you go in without a plan or well thought out strategy, they're going to control the pace. They like to tell you things on a call or in a meeting, a concession that, they don't get in writing, and therefore when it comes time to get things on paper, you don't have anything to translate. They're as Jeff said, they'll give it to you piecemeal too. So then trying to gather everything that they have offered you together becomes a lot more difficult. They understand, timing, right? If you have a date you need to start your project by, they'll run you right up close to your deadline, by giving you these denials and things like that. And before you know it, you're kind of painted into a corner and you have to make a decision. They basically test your conviction of whether or not you're going to stick to that deadline. So they really do. They understand the game really well. And again, if you're not prepared, you're almost at their mercy.
Jeff, Shane, before we get down into pricing and things like that, I know a few years ago I was working on an engagement with Oracle, and the nomenclature, I'll call it, associated with the contract structure was a little bit different than what I was used to. Can you kind of walk me through just the kind of what's the top of an Oracle agreement, and what do they call those sub agreements underneath those?
I mean, you've got a number of pieces depending on what you're looking at, right? But I mean, the big ones are going to be your cloud subscription agreement, your CSA. Again, sometimes the nomenclature changes, and then your order forms underneath that.
Okay.
Those are going to be the big ones, especially when you're looking at software as a service, right? You still might have your DPA, your data processing agreement. You have different links that they have to different pieces within their website that they can change. But those are kind of the big documents. It's kind of like your master services, the CSA, and then the order form that's going to have your bill of materials and the pricing and all the terms related to that transaction. It's still primarily that, but you're right. You do have to kind of look at some of the other ancillary pieces.
And does that include services as well, or is there typically a whole set of separate agreement for services?
That can be separate. It certainly would be a separate order form, but there could be a separate under a separate agreement structure as well, where you'd have the professional services that you would use.
Okay. Well, why don't we get into the way that Oracle actually prices their SaaS products now, right? I think people that work with SaaS agreements, right? If they're have done a Workday, or if they've done anything on Microsoft, they probably have some familiarity with SaaS. What makes Oracle unique, if I can ask it that way, that when you're dealing with Oracle, you says it's not like these other guys, you got to be aware of this, and this.
Did you know that UpperEdge offers subscription advisory services? This on-demand solution provides essential benchmarks and market insights specific to your business needs precisely when you need it, empowering you and your team to make informed decisions for your IT initiatives. Position your team for success. Reach out today via the link in the show notes to learn more.
Yeah, I mean, there's some big things to keep in mind. I mean, broadly speaking, they have a couple big buckets for how they license their products. They'll have products that get licensed across your enterprise, right? So covering your entire employee base, which is going to include, contractors and things like that. But other products will be licensed specifically for the sub-user community it's intended for. Something that's kind of unique with Oracle, I would say, compared to a lot of their SaaS competitors, is that they actually do publish a public price list, which is interesting. It doesn't cover their entire set of products, right? So you have certain industry-specific products that do not get published, and they are pretty restrictive with letting that information out. But like, if you're interested, for example, you can just go Google Oracle's public price list, and there you have it. You can see where their list pricing is. But for the most part, a lot of the stuff is fairly standard. Annual subscriptions payable in advance. We typically see them do 3 and 5 year agreements. Sometimes they'll extend it a little bit out to 7 years, let's say. But I would say what is maybe the most unique is how they do break it up by product pillar. Oracle generally, they're trying to, I think, change this a little bit, but still for the most part, they handle each product pillar, talking ERP, HCM, and then they have their industry specific pillars. They keep those very siloed. What I mean by that is the P&L is managed individually, and they do use that as a way to kind of silo the different terms or discounts by product pillar. They make it very confusing. It's hard to work across the pillars at times. They'll give you a different account people for each one, and that makes that can be a challenge in the negotiation as well.
Should I be expecting, like, when we talk about these different product pillars and we talk about discounts, right? Should I be expecting consistent discounts in each product pillar, or do the discount levels that I can achieve as an organization vary based upon the product?
Well, let me jump on that one,
yeah.
Shane, if I can. So It is different, John. I'd say I just want to touch on Shane's last point there. We have seen Oracle shift where, at least for the ERP side of things, you can have one sales rep, but they still have to get approvals, I think, internally for each one of the pillars. So we do see them different, not as different as before, but it might be off by a couple of percentage points, depending on what
Okay.
you're spending. Whereas before, sometimes I could see it off 10, 15%, because each one had a claw to get their own, as Shane was mentioned, on the P&L side of it. So what I see more now of is you have kind of your traditional ERP SaaS, right? You have a sales rep for that. There's multiple people that cover each pillar, like the HCM, CX, et cetera. But those are people that'll help them and support that one sales activity with one rep that can cover it. The industry specific, so if you're a retail company, you want the retail specific, that's a different rep. That's a whole different tower. And then the
Okay.
tech stack is a third tower. So if you think about it that way, you really have those three, and Java is separate as well.
But is I think about those three or four, I'm going to throw out a number, whether that's right or wrong, right? If I achieved a 65% discount on the ERP, would I be looking at retail and saying, okay, I should be getting the same 65% discount? Or is retail going to say, no, you're not going to get that, right? Because the discounting against that product is completely different than the discounting that you would get on an ERP product.
Yeah, it's the latter. It's going to be different when you get to those different levels. Now, if you could try to do it, and we work with clients to try to get them look at this holistically, you can start getting them a little bit closer, maybe. But it is its own, to your point, John, a separate pillar, separate discounting based on your spend level there.
So
In
every
fact,
product that you negotiate with Oracle, you're kind of starting from scratch from that standpoint to say, okay, I've got to figure out what my discount's going to be now because I can't just take what I got on my last product and apply it.
At least within those pillars, correct. So even when we do just an ERP deal, you'll have something separate for maybe for ERP versus HCM, right? There might be slightly different percentages. They'll still be close, but they'll be different percentages.
Okay. All right, that's good. So as we're thinking about then Oracle and negotiating with Oracle, and this is probably a loaded question because it's probably different for each product, but I'm going to ask it anyway, right? I mean, are there three or four commercial terms that you absolutely have to nail with Oracle, to get it right? Maybe they're different than other products, but if I was saying, hey Jeff, I can only negotiate three things. What are and I got to win. What are they going to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the first one's going to be obviously your pricing and discounting. That's the first one because, and people need to understand this with all cloud providers, but especially with Oracle, that number can't go down, right? They look at things as a revenue stream. And so once you lock in on that first deal, even if you find out your pricing isn't competitive later on, it's not like Oracle's going to go back and say, okay, we're going to start discounting that down. That revenue stream is what they're forecasting, maintaining. So that's the key first piece is, do I have the right price, the right discounting that's going to set a precedent going forward, right? The second part with that would also be cover 2 and 3 together a little bit. Well, the second part is going to be any price protections. So products that you're thinking you're going to use in the future, but you're not ready to make that purchase now, you've got your best negotiation leverage up front. So you want to get those price protected, those discounts protected. And the third, and sometimes the third can be almost one of the top pieces to get, is your renewal term protections. Right? Understanding what that's going to look like at renewal gets really great to be introduced a teaser rate up front or something good, and you come for renewal, and all of a sudden your price starts going up quite a bit. So those I would say would be the three biggest pieces to get. Shane, is there anything you want to add to that?
Go ahead. Shane.
I think I would say anything that can relate to flexibility around your bill of materials. So what I mean by that is there's a couple of big things. So rebalancing rights and what we would consider swap rights. So rebalancing would give you the ability to, within your bill of materials, let's say you had one product at 100 licenses and another at 50. And after go live and in production, you realize you actually need 75 for both. You can rebalance with those two products down to 75. Now, the catch being you can't lower your annual contract value if the pricing works out that way. It still has to remain the same, but at least you're right sizing your license counts. So the other thing would be termination favor, swap rights. That gives you the ability to take products that, let's say, you would consider shelfware that you've licensed but you're not using, and swap it for something outside of your bill of materials. Again, the catch, you can't lower your annual contract value, but at least you're now optimizing your environment. You have products you're actually using, and Oracle will push that these rights be for products within the same pillar. Again, we talk about how they really like to stick within the pillars. That would count for these as well. But again, these are opportunities where you at least can optimize what you're using and get the most value out of it.
So, I mean, you guys know that I love a good horror story and a good lawsuit and a good train wreck. And we get into helping clients sometimes when they get audited and negotiating during an audit. I mean, can you put forward maybe a story without naming the client of where you've seen a really bad negotiated Oracle deal that you want to see, that we can give kind of some real world examples of what the implications are when you screw it up on a negotiation?
I mean, these weren't clients we assisted, right? So this kind of came to us after the fact, right?
Exactly, right. That's what I said.
Yeah.
We're being called to the accident, right? And maybe we can just talk about a real world example that said, hey, we got involved in this client. The negotiation was really poor on the baseline, and this is ultimately what it cost the client in real dollars.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going too specific on some of these things. We certainly have seen deals where we get, like you said, called after the fact. It's kind of the ambulance, and their discounting is just very poor, right? It's really at the bottom end, below market. They should almost be in some cases, 10, 20% higher, maybe 30, double, kind of depends where they are on there, right? And sometimes that could just be simply they did things on a transactional basis and didn't bundle it together. So they got piecemealed along the way. That's one area. They have no price protections as far as their renewals go. And then they have, to Shane's point, they have a bunch of shelfware. They overbought. That's the other big thing. Oracle will approach you and say you should buy everything up front. All the vendors do this. We'll give you the best deal. But if you don't know what a good deal looks like, you know what that is. You might be being told, well, we'll give you 50%. That might sound great. Based on what you're spending, that might not be a very good discount at all. And so you have people sometimes that purchase way too much up front, and now they can't reduce it. If they reduce it, Oracle comes back and says, well, now we got to reprice it based on the new list price. So that's where people make, so let's just say you're paying $1 million as a round number, John, right? And you're saying, I'm not using 50% of it. So I want to cut 50%. I figure I'm going to spend now $500,000 a year. They'll come back and say, no, we reprice it and discount it based on the list price. Now you're still paying $850,000 or $900,000. You're saying, but I just cut it in half. So that's where clients have problems. And then on top of that, you're getting a big increase. You're saying, I'm not using half it. Now I'm getting an increase on top of it. So those are situations where people could be spending, millions, if not tens of millions more than they should be, because they made a very poor decision up front.
Okay. All right. But like I said, sorry to spring that one on you, but I love a good disaster. So we've got a lot of clients that call us 30 days, right? Think they can handle the Oracle negotiation, get to the point where they got paper and they have to renew, and we got 30 days, and they call us and say, hey, what can you do for us, right? And expect us to do miracles. Which my understanding is, okay, you can call us and we'll do our best to try to help you. But in an ideal world, right? What kind of lead time should I be thinking about in terms of really negotiating an outstanding deal with Oracle, particularly in a renewal situation, I guess?
Okay, yeah, because they're a little bit different, right? If you're doing net new or renewal, I think you at least want to start looking out, the minimum 6 months. But if really renewal, I look at a year out to at least start doing your assessment as to where you are. And I think the key thing you want to look at is holistically, right? Where are we across our entire footprint with Oracle? Don't just look at the renewal itself that's coming up. You've got to look at all the different pieces there and try to figure out the different leverage that you have. So we'll look at things as an example of what's your relationship, who is it with, right? How senior in the organization are you? Have you been doing reference calls? Things of that nature that you can leverage, right? The value you're getting, what your deal looks like, right? Where are there opportunities for improvement? Where is it not optimized? Right. So and then any additional future purchase. So we kind of look at all those things. And that takes time to do. For renewal, I like to start looking at those things maybe a year in advance. So this way you kind of understand what your opportunities are and can then try to maybe do an early renewal. This way, if you're not getting what you want, you have the ability to at least go back internally and say, look, we're not sure this is a relationship that we're happy with as it is. What are our options? Now, you're probably not going to be able to rip and replace it. But if you have other things going on within your organization, you might say, you know what, we're going to look at this and do a 1-year renewal or maybe 2 years. But as part of that, we now have and maybe you have other parts of your business that you're saying, we're not going to look at maybe RFP this in the future. So we can't do something in the first 12 months, but over the next 2 to 3 years, we might be able to start moving or migrating away if it's just a relationship that you don't feel very confident in. So I'm not saying you want to make idle threats, but it helps you to understand that. To your point, John, you're not going 30, 60 days in advance when you've got no leverage, and Oracle knows that. And any cloud provider does that.
Yeah, so Jeff, let's talk a little bit about your practice and Shane involved in it and UpperEdge, right? And when we get engaged with a client, right? Can you kind of take us through kind of the steps that would happen in with your practice and how we would work with a client to, I'll call it, build out the story, and what's really the advantage of calling UpperEdge to help you out here?
Yeah. So again, I'll look at it more from the renewal perspective that you brought up, John, but it would certainly apply to any net new as well. I start just looking at, what's your current state, right? So in the renewal, what's your current footprint, both on the application side for software as a service, also if you have on-premise applications, right? Some people have some of the legacy applications, and then we'll also look at the tech stack, both on-prem and if you have OCI, right, and potentially Java, and just get a sense as to where that lies. What type of discounting and protections do you have there in the overall relationship? Because that can also help drive leverage in the discussion. Then I'll look at key requirements, right? So we see where there's opportunity for improvement, what the full footprint is, and then are you making any purchases, any growth going forward, right? So we want to understand where we have different leverage points and kind of build that story out. We also want to look at that relationship so we know who within your organization, what senior levels have relationships within senior levels of Oracle. That's going to help position the story. So based on all of that, we want to come up with a negotiation strategy and say, here's who we should approach. Here's the story we want to tell. Here's the sequencing of events that we want to have for the next 6 months. Once you have all that coordinated, you're ready to go, and you know your story and your storytellers and know what you're trying to achieve in the negotiation, and you have your strategy, now you're ready to initiate contact. Most organizations, John, don't do that. They start saying, well, I need to get a proposal. So they start contact Oracle and say, well, what can you give me a proposal and a renewal? And they haven't thought through all that. And Oracle already has. They already have a playbook because they do this every day. So
Exactly.
they're already going to different people within your organization, understanding, getting different bits of information that might seem innocuous, but when you get a dozen of those data points and knowing what your tech person wants, what the business, the HCM lead, the finance lead, now you've got a story from your Oracle side. You've got leverage you're gaining in this negotiation. So I think that's one of the big things we help with, John. And then 2, knowing what does a highly competitive deal look like? And then 3, what's the messaging and the sequencing events that we've seen be successful? And then the 4th thing I think comes back is something that Shane talked about, right? Oracle's very good at telling you no. Well, if you hear no 2 or 3 times, you might say, well, I think we pushed them far enough. Whereas we're saying, no, we've seen this. So sometimes you need that push that says, I know you're a little uncomfortable, but trust me, you're going to get there and you've got to push.
Right. No, I think that's a great example, Jeff, of back when I was in the role that I was, right? It was like, I'm only going to try to push once or twice. And if they say no a couple of times, I'm probably going to say, all right, I'm done. Right. So I think that's a great example. So, well, Jeff and Shane, I do really, really want to appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today about Oracle in general in your practice. What's the best way to get a hold of you if companies want to kind of reach out and say, hey, I want to learn more about Oracle?
And they can just come out and contact us through the UpperEdge website, right, at upperedge.com. And Kylie can talk about that. We've got contact information there, and someone will get back to you quickly, and you get on the phone with Shane and myself. I do want to touch on one thing, John, just back that we were talking there. Last thing is about kind of the, Oracle's year end is coming up on May 31st. That's a big time, right? That people have most of their contracts or it's their biggest quarter. You don't always have to do a deal at year end to get a good deal. But if you are looking at that and you have some renewals, it goes back to the timing piece you said. You want to start now. You want to start in February, March at the latest. Don't wait till April where you don't have any leverage. But I did want to highlight that piece.
I appreciate that, Jeff. And Kylie, maybe you can take it from here and outline some of the things that we're going to include as part of the links on the podcast.
Yeah, for sure. So like Jeff said, I will make sure to include info on the UpperEdge website, our contact us form, so that you can reach out to us. I'll also include our Oracle Advisory Services page so you can get a little more insight into exactly what it does, though this episode hopefully gave you a lot of insight into how we can help. Like Jeff said, the year end is coming up in coincidentally almost exactly 6 months from when, 4 months from when this 2 months from when this goes live. So definitely make sure that you're getting on it, reaching out to UpperEdge for help with your negotiations. And we will also have some Oracle resources, blogs, podcasts, things like that you can explore as well. And thank you so much, Jeff and Shane, for coming on the show.
Thank you, Kylie. Thank you, John. Always a pleasure.
See you guys later.
Thank you for listening to Insights for IT Negotiations. This episode was hosted by John Belden and Kylie Chisholm and produced by Mike Brown. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss a new episode. For more information on IT sourcing and risk management strategies, visit UpperEdge.com and subscribe to our monthly UpperEdge newsletter. Thank you for listening.